I'd like to call the Board of Education meeting to order on the July 31st Board of Education meeting. Wichita Public Schools will be the district of choice in our region where all students and staff are empowered to dream, believe, and achieve. Please join me for a moment of silence. Thank you. Tonight, our color guard is provided by the Hamilton Middle School Leadership Program. Commanding the color guard tonight is Cadet Liliana Morales Garcia, escorted by Cadet Madison Swain. Carried by the Kansas flag is Cadet Leland Clay, escorted by Cadet Jordan Ray. Please stand for the presenting of the colors. You have permission to post the colors.
Thank you, ma'am. Order, colors, post. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Present arms. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Order, arms, post. Colors, hold, center, face. Colors, turn.
Please join me in thanking the Hamilton Color Guard. Patrick, our first item, please.
First item under reports, Service Employees International.
I do not see Esau present. Next item.
Next item under reports, United Teachers of Wichita.
Welcome, Katie. Thank you for being here.
Hold this down. Okay. Can you hear me? Okay. Good afternoon, Vice President Albert, board members, and Superintendent Bielefeld. Sorry. Logan's not here today, right? Okay. I wanted to extend my sincere thanks to each of you for your efforts in this contract that we just finished up negotiating that benefits our educators. Our executive board has recommended a yes vote, and certified staff will vote on August 3rd through August 11th. The contract is more than just a piece of paper. It is a testament to the collaborative spirit that exists between the BOE and UTW, and it shows our shared commitment to fostering a positive educational environment in Wichita Public Schools. Our schools would not be able to thrive without the passion, dedication, and expertise of our educators. That's why we're pleased with the provisions in this contract that will support teachers with extra pay when they're asked to work their plan times or take on extra students due to the substitute shortage. One thing that stands out is the continued trust that you've placed in our teachers by preserving the right to remove a disruptive student from the classroom. This decision recognizes the importance of maintaining a learning environment that's conducive to learning for all students. By doing so, you acknowledge the significance of safeguarding both the expertise of our teachers and the learning opportunities for those who might otherwise be hindered by continuous disruptions. That being said, we cannot forget that we still have work to do. Teacher workload is still an issue nationwide. Teachers have so much on their plates. We notice that the workload disproportionately impacts the retention of our special education teachers. I would like to take a moment to express our gratitude to the new superintendent and our deputy superintendent for their commitment to addressing the workload needs of our special education teachers by revisiting the Special Education Task Force report from spring of 2020 when we looked at some retention measures. They were kind of put on hold due to COVID. So, thank you. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Katie. Patrick, next item.
Next item, public communications.
I see none. Next item.
Next item, consent.
Hazel, do you have anything to pull?
I do not. I would like to pull E9. It's about the art.
Okay. Thank you. Stan?
I'd like to pull the Wichita Metro Transit Authority.
Do you have a number for that?
E17? Yes, E17.
Okay. I have nothing to pull. Julie?
I have nothing to pull.
Kathy?
D1 and D3.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve all other consent items outside of E9, E17, D1, and D3?
I'll make a motion to approve everything else.
Second.
Motion moved by Kathy, seconded by Julie. Everybody raise your hand in favor. Motion passes 6-0. Ernestine?
I would like to know more about the item that says that we have many art projects and pieces of art in this district, and that it's going to be loaned to someone to be on display for the public, and I would like to hear more about that.
The Wichita Public Schools, as Ernestine mentioned, has a very comprehensive art collection. We have a long-time association with the Wichita Art Museum, and this is just an update to that policy. And then those pieces, some pieces from the Wichita Art Museum, then will be on display at Kansas State University later this fall. We're very excited to showcase the public art of the Wichita Public Schools. What would a Kansas art collection be without identifying those from our district?
Can you tell the dates when that exhibit will begin?
It will begin, I will get that information on the exact dates,
Okay,
absolutely.
thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Ernestine? You want to make a motion?
I move that we approve E9.
Thank you.
Motion made by Ernestine, seconded by Stan. All in favor, raise your hand. Motion passes 6-0. Stan?
On E17, the Wichita Metro Transit Authority, I just wanted to point out that we have a wonderful relationship with the public transportation system in Wichita. And I just wanted to give a extra little shout out to West High. Their business community that's around West High goes beyond the call of duty and subsidizes even more to reduce the cost of our students riding public buses to their school. And I'd encourage as many students as possible that might hear this message to check into these routes. The buses are extremely convenient to use, and we have a wonderful partnership, especially for our old Wichita Southeast neighborhood that goes down to the new Wichita Southeast school. And it's a partnership that's been working, and I highly support this program. It was exciting when I happened to be on the Wichita Transit Authority when we started this, and it's grown every year, and love to see the participation there. And I move that we adopt E17.
I second it.
Moved by Stan, seconded by Ernestine. All in favor, raise your hand. Motion passes 6-0. Kathy?
Thank you. I'd like to know if someone could go through the process of the everyday labs. Just take us through the process so the community can also understand what this is all about. Thank you.
Good evening, Board of Education, Superintendent, Vice President Albert. Everyday Labs is an organization that we're partnering with to increase student attendance and hopefully decrease our chronic absenteeism. They are a proactive communication system that supports our efforts, and they utilize the data from student attendance to begin to reach out to parents as those attendance numbers increase. So it's a proactive communication strategy that also hopefully increases communication between building and parents about some of the barriers that the families may be facing, or the resources needed, or the reasons why they're not able to attend.
Is this on top of the truancy program that we also have?
Yeah, it would be in addition to that.
This is in addition to that. And when do you have the data? What happens with the data at that point?
So the data from our system is shared with Everyday Labs. They dissect it and look at the students who levels of attendance are on the rise and potentially hitting that chronic absenteeism rate, so missing 10% or more of their school year. We look to start later in September, so there'd be a couple days already potentially missed with the students, but we would look at that data and then begin to reach out to the students who have started missing school on a regular basis. And when they look at that data, they then generate reports and begin those text nudges. And then the text nudges eventually move into a mail nudge. So depending on where you're at on the number of days missed.
So the parents of these students, Superintendent Bielefeld, they will be getting contacted twice from the school and then from this organization?
Well, I believe it'll
Or do you
come
work
from
together?
the school.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Everyday Labs is more of the awareness piece, the tier 1 efforts, so the beginning stages. Truancy is what happens when they've missed several days and then they're, in danger of, a multitude of different things. So this is more of the proactive beginning stages of reach out in an effort to prevent them from actually becoming truant.
And this is for unexcused absences, correct?
This is a compilation of excused and unexcused.
Are you going to separate those two?
We can in the report, but the chronic absenteeism is based off of excused and unexcused. So instructional time missed is instructional time missed. And what we're trying to do is bring awareness to anytime you're missing a day. We know that there are codes in our system that allow us to filter out students who have a reason, but if you've missed a day, that's still a day of instructional time. So there are ways to filter out the report, so we won't be bombarding parents who have legitimate reasons, but we do want to bring awareness to the importance of attendance, whether it's an excused absence or an unexcused absence.
This is very important, and I'm very glad to see this. This is like extra preventative measures that are going to happen for our students and their families. So I would like to make a motion that we accept this. Thank you.
Motion made by Kathy, seconded by Ernestine. All in favor, raise your hand. Motion passes 6-0.
And just one more thing, not for you, Dee Dee, I'm sorry. Okay, what does, on D3, SPIRE is the acronym. What does it stand for?
We researched today and we couldn't find it, so we knew we needed the expert. So Amanda Schorchel's here to help us.
And it's going to be a good year when I get to champion reading right off the bat. So glad to be here. Good evening.
Welcome.
So SPIRE stands for Specialized Program Individualizing Reading Excellence.
That's a mouthful.
It is, which is probably why they shortened it to an acronym for us.
That is.
Yes. Specialized Program Individualizing Reading Excellence.
I hope it's as good as it sounds.
about how the 7 schools were selected and kind of what's the plan for the pilot?
Yeah, so if you don't mind, I'm going to pass these out to the board.
Thank you.
So as this gets passed around, you'll see starting at the top, the selection criteria for the schools that were involved both last year and the schools we're proposing to be involved this year. We do look at things like title status, whether the building is title or non-title. We also look at specialized programming they might have that would tell us a story about how all students respond to the intervention, such as newcomer programs or categorical. We look at leadership and available support, so whether they have a full-time coach or a part-time coach really helps whether the implementation is going to go well. We look at school data, where are they sitting at the end of the year, mid-year, etc. We look at their magnet focus areas, and we look at some training availability. So last year on the left, you can see our Aspire Sound Sensible schools and our Really Great Reading schools. And on the right, the changes that we made moving into 23-24, if this goes through. There's also some information towards the bottom about just cost and benefit as well as timeline.
Do we have outcome data for the last year?
We do. I can get you some. Yes. Shannon Balthrop has been instrumental in student support in collecting data both in the program itself as well as through Fashbridge screeners to show the difference between what we currently have and how those students are doing at the end of the year and how students involved in this program or these programs were at the end of last year as well.
Okay, yeah, could you give that to the board?
Yes, I can.
Is it always 7 schools, or because it's a pilot, it may increase next year if we have the data that this program is increasing our reading?
That would be the hope. The goal would be to take the 5 or 6 curriculums we already have on our protocol in order to reduce variability, bring it down to 1. So that because of our high mobility, teacher turnover, that we are consistently giving our Tier 3 students a chance with 1 curriculum that's comprehensive of both word recognition and language comprehension.
Very good. Thank you.
And I would just put in kind of an aside, reducing variability and kind of removing things from teachers' plates, trying to circle around one thing so we're not doing a ton of different things.
Right. Thank you. Utilizing their time a little bit more effectively and efficiently.
Correct.
Very good. Our teachers are going to love that.
Yeah.
I'd like to make a motion to accept this.
Motion made by Kathy, seconded by Julie. All in favor, raise your hand. Motion passes 6-0. Thank you, Amanda. Patrick, next item.
Next item, under policy, first review, alignment of proposed updates of administration policies.
This is the first read on these policies, and we will have a second read at the next board meeting and vote on them then. Do any of the board members have any questions or requested information on either policy 1400 or 1425? Okay. Seeing none, Patrick, next item.
Next item, under operations, resolution, Board of Education meetings calendar.
We have had 2 reads on this calendar. Are there any adjustments that anyone would like to make? Do I have a motion to accept the board calendar for the next year?
So moved.
Motion made by Stan, seconded by Kathy. All in favor, raise your hand. Motion passes 6-0. Patrick, next item.
Next item, under operations, facility planning and capital forecasting.
We're going to welcome Luke to give our presentation this evening.
All right, good evening.
Do we have handouts this evening, Luke?
Oh, yes. Sorry.
We kind of like those.
We have to straighten our neck,
sir. Get wet.
Oh, okay. That's okay. I'll keep it up.
Yeah, they would know.
Well, it's like the ticket under the seat.
I don't know what that is.
Did you give me the wrong one?
That's a bonus.
I know.
That's for you,
Well,
Kathy.
the superintendent didn't get one. I'll give him mine. Here, pass this to Kelly.
Thank you, Patrick.
I don't need sugar.
Okay.
Give it to Kelly.
Oh, this is the budget.
For you.
There you go.
Yes.
Sure.
It's for you. I paid it forward, Luke.
Yeah. Okay, everybody ready? Okay.
All right.
Luke, go for it.
All right. Good evening, Superintendent Bielefeld, Vice President Albert, and members of the board. I'm joined tonight by our Director of Design and Construction, Randy Scott, and we're here to present part 2 of the facility planning and capital forecasting presentation that was started in May of this year. To give a quick recap of what was covered in May, we gave an overview of the facility assessment process we have undergone over the past year. We also discussed deferred maintenance and took a deep dive explaining a measurement we call Facility Condition Index, also, which is called FCI for short. And since we'll be using those two terms a lot tonight, I would like to remind you that deferred maintenance is a term we use to represent the cost required to replace all equipment and infrastructure that has reached the end of its projected life cycle. And FCI represents the total deferred maintenance of a building or portfolio of buildings divided by the expected cost to replace them entirely with new buildings of similar function and size. So our goals for tonight's presentation are to review our district-specific data, review our capital planning history, discuss our current maintenance initiatives, and plot out the next steps from here. And before we jump into the numbers, we do want to start by putting the size and scale of our district into perspective. We'll be throwing out some pretty big numbers, which can be overwhelming if taken out of context. So as we go through the information, please keep in mind just how large our district portfolio is in comparison to the maintenance needs we will be talking about. It should make it a little easier to process and digest. So here are a few key facts to keep in mind. Our district consists of 100 total buildings, 10 million square feet of space, and 180,000 acres of land. The average age of our buildings is 60 years old, and the total replacement value of our buildings in today's dollars is over $2 billion. So without further ado, our total deferred maintenance backlog number as of today is $1.18 billion. I know that's a very high number, but keep in mind that it is based on system and equipment life cycles. So to better clarify, what this total deferred maintenance number represents is that we have $1.18 billion in equipment and building systems that have reached the end of their anticipated useful life. That doesn't mean the equipment has reached a point of failure. It simply means that the systems and equipment included in this number have all been used to the full extent expected based on industry experience and standards. So within this total number, there are varying levels and degrees of need depending on how the systems are currently performing. I don't want to water it down too much because the number does accurately reflect the replacement needs we should be planning for. I just wanted to be sure to make that distinction with the board. So the pie chart shown here illustrates how the needs are distributed in a very general sense. Our two highest priorities are HVAC and electrical, followed by structure and exterior enclosure work, which includes brick repair, roof replacement, and windows, then plumbing and site and interior finish work. When using the equation for FCI that I mentioned earlier, our district FCI score calculates to 0.53 or 53%. And to refresh your memory on the FCI sliding scale that was presented in May, the graphic shown on this slide illustrates the stages a building goes through on the FCI scale. With our current score of 53%, we are sitting firmly in the orange zone. So not of huge concern yet, but definitely something we need to be keeping our sights on and actively working to mitigate from slipping further towards the red. So as you're processing this, I'd like to quickly remind the board that deferred maintenance is the inevitable byproduct of every building in existence. And although our number is high when compared against the total replacement value of our entire building portfolio, we aren't in bad shape overall currently. With that said, as you will hear throughout the remainder of this presentation, we are reaching a critical juncture in which we will need to start making some calculated and strategic investments in order to solidify our district's long-term success. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Randy Scott.
Good evening. I want to go through a little bit of our current capital planning and what we've done with current funding projections. So our finance department understands the deferred maintenance needs very well and has done a great job of supporting them as best they can. Our current capital budget of $20 to $22 million per year is higher than it's ever been in Luke and I's time with the district. Of that amount, only about 18 million goes towards true deferred maintenance because, inevitably, new initiatives and needs arise throughout the year that generally require some capital, some commitment from capital. So the graph you're looking at here shows that if we stick with our current funding model of 18 million per year, our deferred maintenance backlog will continue to steadily increase, resulting in our total FCI score exceeding 100% by year 2033. At that point, the wiser investment will be to start looking at replacing certain buildings entirely rather than continuing to try to repair and maintain them. So if we dig in a little deeper and look at the funding gap, the two graphs on the left of this slide show the funding needed, represented in blue, versus the actual funding going in, represented in orange, and both graphs are adjusted for inflation. The 3D graph on the right shows the funding gap between the two. It's difficult to tell, but the orange bar does represent 18 million going in every year, adjusted for inflation. It's just dwarfed by the sizable deferred maintenance backlog in comparison. As you can see, if we stick with our current funding model, our deferred maintenance will reach 3.59 billion 10 years from now. So to further dive into that a little bit, this graph shows the capital funding needed year over year in order to keep our FCI score sustained at 53%. The large spikes in need that you're seeing in years such as 2025, 2029, 2032, and 2033 can all be attributed to various bond investments made in the past in which the equipment installed during that time is now reaching the end of its life. But I think the even bigger reason for these spikes is simply that our buildings themselves are 60 years old on average. And most school buildings are only constructed to last approximately 50 to 60 years. When you think about it that way, the facility needs that lie on the horizon, as shown on the graph, really make perfect sense. And the fact that we are in as good a shape as we currently are is a testament to how well we have managed and utilized the limited resources we've had to work with. So, to boil the information represented down in this graph further, the main takeaway is that in order to keep our FCI score sustained at its current level of 53%, we would need to be investing an average of $156 million per year over the next 10 years into addressing true deferred maintenance. That's just what it would take to keep us where we are. If we endeavor to reduce our FCI score, it would take even more than that. So I want to talk a little bit about the impact that COVID relief funds have had. We wanted to make a point to highlight how COVID relief funds have benefited our outlook by providing some financial flexibility that allowed us to put $82 million towards various air quality improvement projects, such as HVAC upgrades, roof replacements, and window replacements. As shown here, the investment that was made provided us with the opportunity to make some headway and actually reduce our FCI score by 2 percentage points from what it would have been. That may seem small, but it's not an insignificant amount when you consider how large our scale is and what it translates to in cost avoidance further down the road. So to further talk about that point, we know that money invested today saves exponentially more down the road, and that's due to a couple of factors. The first is inflation, and the second, and more important, is it's far less costly to perform maintenance on building systems before they fail than it is after they fail. A good example would be brick restoration. A simple thing like tuck pointing and seal coating the brick proactively can save us from the expense of replacing the entire wall system if we wait until failure. We call that cost avoidance. The reason we make that point is because we want to bring the board's attention to the long-term impact of that $82 million investment. Because of it, we saved ourselves $371 million in deferred maintenance needs 10 years from now, which translates to a 7% reduction in our FCI score. So our long-term outlook has certainly benefited from these dollars.
All right. I'm gonna back it off of the numbers because I can see that kind of glazed over look coming on you. So I'd like to take a moment to give a quick rundown of our district's history regarding facility assessments and capital planning. This has always been a priority for us, but in the past, we did not have the funding or resources available to support the effort to the extent that is now being presented. Up until now, we have utilized a combination of resources to gather the information needed to adequately plan. We leaned on in-house staff to advise on the condition of various pieces of equipment and used a scaled-back capital forecasting software to establish our priorities and replacement plans. When we passed bonds in 2000 and 2008, we solicited input from buildings, site councils, community members, and a wide variety of other stakeholders to establish the areas of greatest need. As a result, our bond issues included notable measures to provide new buildings, air conditioning, storm shelters, and address curriculum, tech ed, fine arts, and athletic needs, to name a few. But they also included plans to address a variety of basic deferred maintenance needs that arose through that process. So deferred maintenance has always been something we have targeted. We just haven't had the means to conduct a large-scale evaluation of our buildings until now. We are thankful that this board saw the need for a more thorough and holistic assessment of our district's current state and for supporting this important initiative now and moving forward.
Recognize that, Luke or Randy mentioned they get a $22 million capital outlay budget a year. Luke would take more if we gave him more, but as Susan and I, as we budget, that's the amount that we have. Our total amount of capital funds every year are about $40 million. So part of the reason that we're in the situation we're in is because shortly after the 2008-2009 financial recession and some of the school funding impacts that were made then, we were able to take capital outlay funds and use them for other things, such as like Synergy. We approved tonight the Synergy software. So that's a software product, not a capital expense, but the state freed up those rules and we were allowed to use those funds for that. Well, in order to keep the impact of those cuts, and we did have to make cuts at the time, but in order to reduce the impact of those cuts, the board at the time decided to take some of this money out of capital and use it towards some of these expenses that used to come out of the general fund. So there was a low point after that, and Susan's addressed, she's told you guys about that, but there was a low point where the capital funds were almost to the point where there wasn't even enough cash to kind of keep it going. They've done a great job of building those cash reserves up. Every year, I think over the past few years, Luke's group has seen an increase in what they have. So it's kind of taken a while to recoup where we were a decade plus ago. But I think that's part of the story as to, it's easy to look, in the rearview mirror and say, wait a second, why all this money on deferred maintenance? But the reality is, these decisions were made appropriately at the time in order to help teachers and keep money in the classroom. And now we're kind of seeing the impact of that today. So I don't know if you had anything to throw in, but is that?
Yeah, no, that's great. Appreciate the additional history. All right, so getting close to the end here. Give you some opportunity for questions at the end, but I know we've given you a lot to process. The good news is we've seen this coming and have been proactively taking measures to prolong the life of our buildings as much as possible. On average, our in-house maintenance crews complete about 38,000 corrective maintenance tasks per year. In addition to that, we have ramped up our efforts on the preventive maintenance front, which simply means that we are proactively performing regularly scheduled service to our equipment and systems in the interest of keeping them running at an optimal level. Over the past year, we've completed 4,600 preventive maintenance work tasks in-house and invested $1.5 million in HVAC preventive maintenance contracted work. Our contracted work has touched all central plant HVAC equipment, which equates to roughly 1,000 pieces of air handling equipment, including chillers, rooftop units, air handlers, VRF systems, boilers, pumps, pools, and DDC controls, with plans to increase our efforts next year. We now even have a qualified contractor performing regular preventive maintenance work on all of our storm shelter doors to ensure their integrity is upheld. To give you just one example of the impact preventive maintenance has on our systems, on average we lose between 5 to 10 chiller and VRF compressors per year, which equates to a total cost of between $100,000 to $200,000 and results in numerous building comfort issues. Since we ramped up our preventive maintenance efforts, we have lost 0 compressors, resulting in not just cost savings, but greatly reduced downtime on our cooling systems. In addition to our preventive maintenance work, we have utilized an energy service contract to complete $17 million in HVAC upgrade projects that are financed by the future energy savings they will provide. In short, we are doing as much as we possibly can with the resources we have to mitigate the long-range impact of our deferred maintenance backlog. To conclude, everything we have talked about tonight is a direct effort to positively impact strategic plan goal number 4, schools trusted as safe places. We know how vital of a role our building conditions play in student success and building culture as a whole, which is why we are so committed to projecting the long-range needs, laying out a comprehensive facility master plan, strategizing around that plan, and prioritizing projects that will make the greatest impact, and doing our utmost to keep our current systems operating as efficiently as we possibly can. So what are our next steps from here? First and foremost, we're going to use this data to drive our capital planning, decision-making, and prioritization process, and we're going to update it as projects complete in order to ensure it stays current and relevant over the long term. Second, we need to take this data and use it to start building a 10-year master plan for our district. This document will lay out a realistic action plan for each individual building based on the information we have gathered and presented tonight, in addition to forthcoming demographic and functional utilization data that will be presented by Mr. Armendariz later this fall. Sorry, Fabian, if I butchered that. So all of this data will be evaluated and accounted for in the master plan, which will become the lens through which we view all facility needs and ultimately the playbook we use to establish our future capital plans. To that end, we are about to we published today an RFP soliciting for master planning services, which we will be bringing to the board for award over the next couple of months. I hope it has come across loud and clear that we are taking swift action and will continue to do so. It's critical that we continue to act strategically and decisively regarding our deferred maintenance, because we know that the further our buildings fall into disrepair, the greater we're at risk of failing systems jeopardizing our ability to teach students. And lastly, our timing is good. That's the good news. We know our short and long-term needs and have a clear understanding of what lies on the horizon. There is no question that we have reached a critical juncture, but we're fortunate to have the opportunity to start taking action now in the interest of keeping our buildings high quality, comfortable, and safe environments for our students and staff for years to come. And with that, I will open it up to questions.
Ernestine?
In this 10-year plan, will that be where you identify which schools are not able to be continued in use after that 10 years, and you'll make some suggestions for where the new schools will need to be?
Yeah, great question. So the master plan will include a number of different options for the board to choose from. Those options will come with pricing and all kinds of logistics considerations that would go along with them. So that would be one potential option on the table, is whether or not certain buildings aren't great investments to continue putting our money into towards addressing the deferred maintenance, because in truth, there are certain buildings that have higher deferred maintenance backlog than others. And so that will all be stuff we need to look at as we get into the master planning.
So for example, if you were to look at building X and it has, it's old but 7 years from now it has a power system that goes down, let's say the AC or something like that goes down, and that you would come to us and decide whether or not that it was better to repair that or whether to just...
Yeah, so everything comes with a cost, and I want to honor the history that our district, the rich history that our district does have. We have some beautiful old buildings, but they are more expensive to maintain. And so I think we just need to understand, and the public needs to understand, that if we want to continue to retain those buildings, that we just need to support it with investing the money into them that we need to in order to keep them to the standards we need them to be at.
Keep them safe.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Kathy?
Great presentation, gentlemen. Thank you so much. You definitely know what you're talking about. How behind are we? I mean, okay, that's a broad question. We have 100 buildings, and okay, how many of them are in very good condition? And then how many of them are in what you just described as very poor condition? I like the preventative thought, absolutely. I'm not a reactor, I'm a preventer, so I really like that. We will save a lot of money in the long run. I just want to know, how do you start this? I mean, do you go from bad to okay? I mean, tell me your process and your thinking.
Honestly, and you might have something to add to this, but honestly, I think a lot of those questions are going to be answered as we get into the master planning phase. Okay. Right now, it's just really been data gathering and putting it into a format to where we can process it and we can kind of make sense of it, and now start to make some decisions moving forward with that data. But we do have data on the individual building FCI scores. We didn't want to get too deep in the weeds on that tonight. We wanted to keep it more, kind of district-wide, global perspective. And off the top of my head, I don't know how many are in real higher FCI score. Maybe we don't even go there.
Okay.
But I think I answered your question. And did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Well, we could you'd ask how far behind we are. Well, I don't know.
10 years.
Well, I would say this. Those 10 years have definitely had an impact. If we were to look at what's a reasonable FCI score, what's the gold standard for school districts? School districts can't maintain a 0.10 to a 0.20 FCI. That's unrealistic. Most government facilities, you shoot for about a 0.35. So that kind of gives you some idea of where ideally we would hope to be. We're at a 0.53. So.
That
If
helps.
I may, I just want to also add, I don't think we're behind. I think that we're right at a point where we need to start making some really important decisions before we fall behind. To the point we made in the presentation, the average age of our buildings is 60 years old.
Right.
And so we're just reaching that kind of, I hate to use the word cliff, but I'm going to. We're reaching that kind of fiscal cliff of, we built all these buildings around the same time, and now they're kind of just all reaching, not all of them, but a lot of them are reaching this, point in which they're just old and they need to be invested in.
Well, some of our buildings were deferred maintenance with some of our ESSER funds. And now the ESSER funds are leaving. So when you're talking about the resources that we're going to need to do this, that is not including, because that's not sustainable, the ESSER funds. So is that on top of it? You had said that 40 mil is the capital, okay? And then over here, let me write this down. You said that there was a certain amount of money that we needed. Is that on, here it is, it's the 156 million per year. Is that on top of the 18? Or is that in addition to
Oh,
the
that
18?
includes, yeah, that includes the 18.
Okay, okay. And a lot of our schools, or a number of our schools, have had their air quality fixed already with those ESSER funds, with the HVAC, and the air quality is good. So those would not need to be in the plan, right?
No, the HVAC would be covered, but there's a lot of other building components that we would still need to address in those buildings. So every one of our buildings would absolutely be included in the master plan.
And can we reassure our community that our buildings are safe for their children right now?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
So I just wanted to throw a couple things in there, and it's maybe a small distinction, but the ESSER funds have allowed for financial flexibility for us to be, have free up some other funds to do some of these projects with. So not a lot of these capital projects were directly funded with ESSER, but the influx of ESSER money has allowed us to have more flexibility. Your last point was another one I was going to make. Our buildings are safe. The other thing that I think is important to keep in mind, these numbers are, the term deferred maintenance for a guy like me who's not in their world sounds different than I think exactly what they're talking about. Some of what we're talking about is deferred replacement. So let's say your hot water heater, when you buy it, they tell you it's 7 years is how long it's going to last. Well, when you get to 7 years, you don't just go buy a new hot water heater if your current one is working and functioning well. So these numbers are based on the lifespan that is estimated for the item, whether it's an air conditioner or whatever it is. So that isn't to say we have to replace all of these things on this schedule.
Okay.
But I think the point of the slides that Luke and Randy showed about when we took that 82 million recently and we put it into facilities, it lowered that FCI score, and it lowered it right now a little bit, and 10 years from now a lot.
Right.
So the money we can put in now, the better off we are in the long run, because it'll pay for itself in the end. So, and if I didn't say that right, repeat it. But
Okay. Very, very well said. Okay.
Julie?
And to your point, Superintendent Bielefeld, I did want to make a comment on slide 5, referring to deferred maintenance needs, that historically we have utilized a number of those pieces of equipment far beyond their expected lifespan, and partially just simply because we have done such an excellent job with our maintenance and with your personnel, so that we have been able to utilize those pieces of equipment for far beyond what would have been the industry expected life.
Yes, thank you for mentioning that. That's absolutely true.
Yeah. And what my question earlier was, before that point came up, is you said you put out the RFPs today for the master planning process.
Yes.
So could you let us know kind of what the timeline is on that? I know it takes a little while for those RFPs to come back to your office. So what is the projected timeline on that process?
So they'll be out for responses, RFQ responses, for remember correctly, 3 weeks. At that time, our committee will convene. They'll shortlist candidates for an interview. Then we'll interview those candidates, and then those interviews will be scored according to board policy. And then we will make a decision, and we'll come back to the board for approval of that master planning. I would anticipate that's probably right into August already. It may be October before we come back to the board, but that should be about that timeline.
And
Go ahead.
I would assume you've had a good interest relative to that RFP.
Yes, yeah, we had actually reached out and gotten some guidance on some of the content, and ensure that we included everybody in our master facility planning RFQ from some of the local firms and other firms that we work with on a regular basis. So yeah, we've had a lot of interest. The other thing I wanted to draw attention to was we're not just handling it through the master planning through the RFQ. At our last presentation, you'd ask, what are we doing to maintain it? How do we make sure this facility condition assessment data stays current? And we're committed to that, so much so that we took a position and we made a master facility planning position internally. That position just went up, is posted on the website here, I think tomorrow. And that person's sole purpose is to take all the projects we do and update the data in our VFA software, update our demography study, and keep us current so that as we go through our 10-year plan and we knock off things off of our projects list, we have an accurate picture of what needs to still happen.
Awesome. That's fantastic. And then the only other thing that I just wanted to point out, and we've all said it, but just, you know, a reminder that you've indicated that that the deferred maintenance funding need is $156 million per year. And no matter what we do, it's going to be difficult to tackle that item. But, you know, but, you know, something is better than nothing, right? And and you do show that when we can invest $82 million, that it makes a difference.
So just real quick, touching on that, back to Ernestine's question, that's where we're going to have options we put on the table before the board. And there's going to be a lot of different, you know, a lot of different ways we could go and slice it and dice it. So the $156 million, I don't expect that to be the number that we get every year. That's unrealistic. But we wanted to put it out there so you kind of know the reality of where we stand and have it in your mind as we start to make decisions moving forward that are, you know, kind of whatever's best for our district and, yeah, moving forward. So.
And with that proposal that you bring to us, it'll show if you do these things that it'll adjust that number.
Right.
Awesome.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Okay. I had one question on, under next steps, you said use data to prioritize the needs. Could you walk us through what needs are being prioritized first and what that statement means more?
Yeah, so just wanted to convey that we are, now that we know where we actually stand with our deferred maintenance as a whole, we know. In the past, I would say some of the needs were more, I don't know, how would you say it, isolated needs that would come through, and so we didn't have necessarily a good holistic picture of, say our HVAC, for example. Although HVAC is one that I think we have always had a pretty good handle on where our greatest priorities are, because we get the complaints the most from certain buildings, right? But things like, let's go with like brick repair. Until somebody goes out there and actually starts looking at the buildings closely and evaluating, you know, where we're losing mortar and where there's brick that's starting to spall, and, you know, you're really kind of guessing at which ones are the highest priorities. And so now we have all the data for every building component prioritized to where we know which ones are those greatest need. And so those greatest needs. And so it allows us to prioritize our budget planning year over year a lot more effectively, rather than depending on hearsay or work orders coming through or somebody screaming the loudest. We just look straight to our data and say, this is what our data is showing. These are our buildings that we need to prioritize first. And these are the more critical systems of a building too. It's a lot more important to make sure your HVAC continues to operate than it is to make sure your carpet looks nice. And so making wiser investments with those dollars to make sure that it's going towards the systems that are going to pay the greatest dividends for us in terms of keeping our buildings safe and comfortable and all those things we want for our students and staff.
Yeah,
Anything to add?
I can add a little bit. The software that you've chosen to support, the VFA software, it has the ability to rank projects, and it looks at criticality of failure. It looks at code deficiencies. It looks at safety and security, and it ranks those projects on a higher priority than the aesthetics and so we have the ability to align what we prioritize with whatever the district's greatest needs are. If there's a big curriculum initiative that the board decides to do, we can rank that in our project planning, and it will come out higher on our priority list. So that the software has the ability to really truly align to whatever this board decides is most critically important to the district.
At the top, you mean? Is that what you're saying? I didn't know that.
Kathy?
I do have one more question. There's some of our buildings that are still in the process of having their security entrances updated. Is that part of this initiative, or is that included in this?
So, no, those have not been represented in here because we don't put a project into the system until the work is complete. So we are completing 11 office restricted access projects this summer, and we already have the next 22 in development currently. And then we also have teacher lock initiatives, elevator and badge readers that we're going to be doing, and any response to the emergency radio response surveys that are also being, that's all part of that $18 to $20 million CMAR project that you guys approved a few months ago. So in just a few months, we've already knocked out 11 of those office restricted access projects.
Thank you so much. I think that is so critical going into this next school year. Can you just tell me if Wilbur's in one of those?
It'll be in the
It'll be in
next
the next
22,
one.
right?
All right. Hey, I'm excited. Thank you.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I do think that's an important distinction. Deferred maintenance is different than some of our remodeling projects. So if we add a kitchen or if we do a secured entrance, that takes additional money outside of even the money we're talking about here. And I think in order to put it into context, this helped me. So we have 10 million square feet in our district. Do what? Back off. Okay. I feel like I can't hear myself. 10 million square feet in the district, and about 20 million-ish that we give them. So that's about $2 per square foot. So if you think about it, if you have a 2,000 square foot house, that means you have $4,000 a year to spend on preventive maintenance. So if your HVAC goes out, you're not getting that fixed for $4,000. If you need a roof, if you need a driveway, your garage door, you have trees that need taken down, you need it painted, you need windows. These are all things I'm spending money on my house right now, so that's why it's on my mind. No, it's not, right? So I think when you hear these numbers, they seem so big. But in reality, when you think of 10 million square feet, it really, the amount of money we're putting towards it really is never going to be enough. It's not, at this level. So as a homeowner, we have to make decisions about what we pay for, what we don't, that sort of thing. We do, you guys do a great job, I feel like, of making those decisions. And like Julie said, getting the most amount of life out of what we have. I think what you've done with the compressors, is a good example of what we can do with preventative maintenance. So you all have been really good stewards of what we've been given. I think that means a lot, and I think that is evident in what we've done. But there's needs on the horizon too. So.
Okay. Any other questions? Ernestine?
Comment. Thanks for the heads up about how important it is to Tuck Point brick. I've been thinking it was just a cosmetic thing. I'm going to head home and look at my house.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you very much for the
All right, thank you.
presentation tonight. We appreciate your work. Patrick, next item.
Next item, under Finance, Budget Report.
Thank you, Susan.
All right. Good evening, Vice President Albert, Superintendent Bielefeld, members of the board. Again, my name is Susan Willis. I'm the Chief Financial Officer. That was a lot of financial heavy lifting in a non-financial topic. So you'll actually start to see some of what you heard in Luke's presentation really start to shape and change some of our approach in the fiscal year 24 budget and beyond. But tonight we really do begin the last leg of the fiscal year 24 budgetary process. We will be targeting some looks at the needs assessment process, the state assessment questions, and then really that first look at some of the numbers we have for you, estimates that we've made in the budgeting process for student counts and what those dollars look like. I will preface that we are still waiting on a key piece of information from KSDE, so the numbers probably are not as final as we would normally like to bring you them at this point in the budgetary process. But we are unfortunately going to cover a lot more material related to finance, so a little bit more financial heavy lifting tonight. And because of that, I'm going to turn it over to someone who's been living and breathing this work for the past year, our esteemed Budget Director, Ms. Addie Lowell.
Thank you, Susan. So I'm a little under the weather tonight, but I came to play today, showed up to school so I could come and play because we have a lot of heavy lifting, and I'm excited about it because this will make the rest of our interactions in our budget process with you all for the next 3 meetings super quick and easy. So we're just going to get a ton done tonight. A lot of checklists checked off for all of our statutory budget requirements. So bear with me. I'm sorry for the raspiness in my voice. So we all met back on July 17th to go over building needs assessments. And I'm going to kind of take us through 2 separate timelines tonight. We've got that building needs assessment requirement, and then we've got our kind of revenue neutral rate budget hearing and adoption process. And they're kind of 2 separate things that we have to somehow fit together, and they are kind of clunky in terms of timeline and how they work together. And so we just do the best we can, and it ends up that we have to make a lot of estimates in that process, which is kind of why we're just coming with a ton of info tonight. And that way we can kind of try to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, fit 2 processes on top of each other, and get our budget done. So on June 12th, I'm going to recap some things tonight just so we can document officially that we've done this through our budget process. So June 12th, there was a big presentation on a review of state assessment data and the goals the district has related to what we want for student achievement related to state assessments. We're going to recap on some of that info tonight, but for the most part, that's been done. The board has reviewed state assessments in totality. On the 17th, we met individually. We have 88 attendance centers in this district. There's no way we can review building needs assessments at a board meeting unless you all want to be here for 8 hours. So we set some time aside with you, give you some time to mull over this gigantic book with all of our buildings needs assessments in them, and then go over specific questions and details kind of separately. But we're just kind of going to recap high-level details of what we discussed at that meeting. And then we're going to go through and answer all of those legislatively required questions that we have to answer through this process. After that, each school's needs assessment is going to be published on our website. So by the next meeting, we'll have all of those needs assessments online. And so we'll have that one checked off. And then September 11th, when we do our budget adoption, we will do the next piece of legislative requirements that require us to just put some documentation in the minutes of our meeting stating we did all of this very important work. So I want to call out some of the changes that we made in this needs assessment process this year because it was really significant. Last year, we got the building needs assessments May 2022, I think a couple of weeks before school was about to be out. And we generally like to have a good portion of our budget built that requires school interaction by that time because folks are, jumping into summer mode, getting into summer school time. And so we like to have a good portion of that work done already. So we hit our building principals with that at the very end of May. They always rise to the occasion, and they did last May and got this done for us, and we were so appreciative. We tried to help them out as much as possible by giving a lot of data centrally, and that way they just had to do questions that were very specific to their buildings. Again, they did it on their own. There wasn't a ton of time to do interactions with building leadership teams or site councils. And we really kind of just were able to cover some overarching themes because we had 2 months to compile all of this data and fit it into our budget process. That was pretty much already done by the time we got it. So this year, we started with principals in January. They had enough time to get with their building leadership teams and site councils to gain a lot of feedback and collaboration with stakeholders. We also provided less data centrally, so they really were engaged in this process and had to review more of their data to be able to answer some of the questions for us. And in addition to that, where they just gave us some overarching themes for their barriers, every school was required to make at least one budget request if they listed a barrier that existed. So problem solving around, okay, we know these barriers exist. What budget actions need to be taken for us to support you? And I just want to take another minute to say thank you to all of our incredible building leaders. This is another unfunded mandate that really has generated a lot of extra work, I know in my office, but they do a lot of the heavy lifting in getting this information to us. And so for a thankless job, here's my thank you to you for supporting our budget process to all of our building administrators. So these are some of our current initiatives, and I believe this was presented at the June 12th board meeting. So just to recap, our district level goals around state assessments as we reviewed those requirements now in our budget process. So goal 1 is to raise the level of content that students are taught through curriculum, scales, and SRGs, increase teacher skills and the knowledge they bring to teaching of the content. We're making heavy investments in PD and things like letters. The next piece is increasing the level of students' active learning and engagement of the content through instruction, assessments, and engaging strategies. We also established some district goals related to outcomes. And so obviously increasing the percentage of students that are achieving 3s and 4s, which is considered proficient on Kansas state assessments, but also decreasing the number of students that are in that level 1 proficiency category. So those were some of the goals that we have just outside of the budget process that really help tie into the building needs piece as well. And again, just to recap, I know you guys each reviewed each of your schools' assessment data that's in the building needs book that was provided to you all, broken down by student demographic. But here's the overall district of where we are. So looking between 21 and 22, in that level 1 category, we were able to reduce the number of students in that level 1 and saw some increases at level 3 and 4 in both reading and math at just about 1% moving out of level 1. So really targeting those goals and making sure that we're reaching them. Okay, so now the budget fund pieces. Part of the building needs assessment requires us to develop the barriers that exist in our schools so that we can begin to problem solve the budget allocations that need to be made. And so here's kind of just a summary of what our building leaders said were the barriers that they faced, and these were the majority. So where we had a majority of principals that stated this was a barrier in their building. So we had 48 out of 88 list child study team ratios as a barrier. That's your counselors, social workers, psychologists, more of your student support services. 59 out of 88 listed paraprofessional training. 61 out of 88 list parent and community involvement, which I will say is very difficult to address with financial resources alone. And 82 out of 88 list attendance. And you heard about some of the fun initiatives that the district is implementing tonight to help to start to address that particular barrier. So you all now also took the data that you read from these assessments, and we compiled our own list of barriers that we felt existed. And this list did not significantly change much from last year to this year. The barriers are still the same. They still exist. If anything, they may, some categories may be getting worse instead of better. And so we kind of have them listed, and this is what will be posted on our website for the board's response to this question of what barriers exist for all students to achieve proficiency on state assessments. So district-wide, this is our response to that question. So students, we've listed poverty, feeling disconnected, mental health issues, attendance, language and cultural differences, and other distractions. Staff, we listed student behavior, lack of needed supports, staff health and attendance, lack of training, expectations for student success, and student-teacher disconnect. Family is poverty, again with the language and cultural differences, feeling disconnected from school, lack of time, and just all the other conflicting priorities that exist. I know I have my kids in every last athletic activity on the face of the planet, so making sure we have time to read at the end of the night is difficult to make sure we fit that in. So mental health and other health issues, school safety is a distraction. In terms of our community stakeholders, the deterioration of social norms, lack of supports for families in need, deterioration of support for education, misinformation about what is happening in our classrooms, unrealistic expectations of schools. I know going through the pandemic, we saw just how vital schools are to our communities and the services we provide to students and families. And so there's tremendous expectation on the services schools provide. And then just the general politics around education. So this is our list. I'm going to look to all of you to shake your heads and nod that we agree that these are the barriers that exist in our district. Thank you. So part 2 of this requirement says what budget actions should be taken in order to start to address some of these barriers. And so this is kind of the first time we've done this where we put a comprehensive list of really all the things we did related, the budget allocations that we made related to all of those building needs assessment requests that came our way. So obviously recruitment and retention of staff through wages and raises is always a priority for the board to make sure that we're keeping our highly qualified, excellent teachers and paraeducators and all of the rest of the support staff happy in our buildings teaching our kiddos. School safety was another initiative that we took to heart this year, and we reallocated every security officer that we added to the budget through ESSER funds, and we were able to move them into operating budgeting funds. So that means that any security officers that we've added through those one-time funds, they're here to stay. We're not saying goodbye to any of those positions once our federal funding goes away. Same thing with the additional child study team. That ratio was a key barrier listed by our building administrators. Every ESSER-funded counselor and social worker has a home now in our operating budget. So that was another budget reallocation that we were able to make this year to make sure that we address those barriers that they listed. Mr. Bielefeld will be super happy about the investment in the Future Ready Center. That was also supported by some ARPA funds, and we were able to move that into our operating budget as well to make sure all of our students are career ready when they leave our doors. We added various FTE supports at a slew of schools, which we do on a regular basis, and that's another key point I'd love to bring up. We do have building needs all the time, and while this is a point-in-time snapshot of things that we were able to do and reallocate, we're constantly making shifts and shuffles based on where students are moving, where buildings have needs, the populations that exist, the demographics of a particular building. So things are always moving and shaking. We do, I think last year so far, we're up to almost 400 budget requests and changes for fiscal year 24. So it's every day, if not twice a day, we're making some kind of change to help support a building. We added some pre-K capacity by turning a room into a unified room, so that just allows some diversity in our pre-K classrooms. Piloting this attendance initiative at 12 schools so we can see what progress we can make on that attendance barrier that you all as a board and our building administrators have listed. In addition to, our budget is limited. We have a ceiling on what we're able to do. So, I know sometimes we make requests and we can't get to all of them. We can't do everything. We can do a lot with our budget. We can't do everything. And so what we try to do is never just say, no, we can't do that. It's you requested it, here's a resource for now that it didn't quite make the cut this year based on other priorities, but here's an option to get us by. And so we're still using ESSER funds for that purpose. So using ESSER funds next year for schools where they listed, I want to keep my tutors, I want to keep my student success advocates, I want all my mental health initiatives. They still are, and we're utilizing ESSER funds for those purposes. Summer school, family engagement activities, and all the individual school needs that they listed through their building needs assessment as well. Continued support for PD initiatives, restorative practices and letters, still funding those through ESSER funds. And then we got to pilot an ESOL centralized enrollment, which was super cool to see all the families coming through this building. I'm a huge proponent of the centralized enrollment movement, so that was super cool to see. So those were some specific budget reallocations that were made through this process to hopefully start to alleviate some of the barriers that we're seeing listed in these assessments. So like I said, the needs, wants, and barriers are so great, and our budget is limited, and it's not always a financial resource that we're limited by. I think I heard today we have 250 vacant paraeducator positions. So here's my plug. If you would like to come and support students, we have so many open jobs where you can come and work with kiddos every day, and we have the needs. So it's not we have them in the budget. There's the money there for them. We just need the people. So that human capital is such a critical component of where we're limited, and so sometimes it doesn't make sense for us to add another paraeducator vacancy onto the list of, you know, growing vacancies we have in the district. So it's not always a financial resource that's limiting us to be able to remove all those barriers. So time is a big one. Our own ability to influence students and families and stakeholders, and like I said, the human capital piece. And we'll get you a final budget number when we do our proposed budget at the next meeting, but still almost at $1 billion. We can pretty much do anything we want with $1 billion, but we can't do everything. We can't meet every need that all of 88 of our attendance centers have, so we have to make choices. And so you'll continue to see that through this process. We won't be able to meet every barrier and every solution to that problem that's presented, but we certainly do the best that we can. So. Okay, so now step number 3 requires the board to answer an important question about now if we take all these budget actions, how long will it take for students to achieve a proficiency level above a 2? And so on the 17th, you all were in agreement to stick with our goal of 50% of students performing at levels 3 and 4 by the year 2030, and trying to get another year's worth of data just to make sure we can evaluate that timeline effectively to make sure that that target year is where we need to be. In addition to that, I think including our district's goal for what we want to see in terms of moving students out of that level 1 proficiency level between 1% and 5% is a super smart move. It makes us be able to evaluate and measure this a lot easier. So including that piece, I think, is important in this process too. So your response to this is also going to be published district-wide. So I'm going to look to you all again in agreement that we did this together, and this is what we're posting on behalf of our buildings. So thank you. Okay, so building needs assessments for the most part is done now. All we will do is some official documentation on September 10th. So thank you for bearing with me on that super fun topic. We're pretty much got it done. So now I'm going to move on to our kind of budget adoption timeline, which includes that revenue neutral rate process. And I would just like to add that Susan is so brave because estimating a mill levy before we even have our state budget form, she got that info to you on June 29th. We didn't even have our state budget forms, which really is the one place that we put in all of our financial data, and it helps us to calculate all of our revenues, shows us how our cash balances can potentially affect our mill levy rates, and she's such a whiz. She gets you that before we even have that software. So she's braver than I am sometimes, and appreciate her doing that work. So we've got a lot of steps on this done already. So the 12th, we gave you some initial revenue estimates and some initial mill levy estimates. June 15th, we got our assessed valuations, so we were able to use those to calculate what we anticipated to come to us for tax revenues. June 29th, again, we kind of made that intent to exceed that revenue neutral rate. On July 3rd, that was the first business day that we had our forms. So like I said, you guys are getting estimates before we even have the stuff that helps us do it. So. And then we met on the 17th to make sure that we were able to send off our revenue neutral rate form off to the county, and everyone kind of be on the same page with that maximum cap that we were submitting to the county. Again, that's an estimate. It just gives us the maximum amount that we could potentially be looking to levy to all of our local taxpayers, but it just gives us the max. It's not ever necessarily what we anticipate to do. It's going to generate some estimated tax statements, which I know creates some commotion on you guys' end. So just want to be kind of clear about the distinction of we estimate high and we always come down, and so statements that are going to be going out to this process may not be exactly what we end up approving through our budget this fiscal year. So tonight, I'm going to give you some more concise budget estimates. But like Susan alluded to, we are still waiting on a very critical percentage from KSDE that calculates, I'm going to say, 8 to 10%, $8 to $10 million of our budget. And so depending on what that percentage does this year, it could potentially throw some funds in some different directions. So we're hoping that we're kind of, we've got some good estimates, but things could change by the time we get to you again on the 10th for our proposed budget. So that's what we're going to do this evening. So we had kind of given some revenue estimates early in June for where we thought things were going to fall. And for that purpose, we really leave some of the weighted enrollments flat. We know, in general, our enrollment is declining. And so, but when we're preparing these state budget forms, you guys are helping us to establish the maximum budget that we can spend. So we always want to give ourselves some wiggle room in each of our funds to make sure that, you know, in case a particular weighting were to increase in a year, that we have the budget to allow us to spend the dollars on those kids that are generating that funding. So we always go a little high, which is why you see some additions. We don't necessarily anticipate our weightings to increase, but it gives us that maximum budget authority that we all need from you. So ultimately, what you'll see on our proposed budget is for our general fund, our weighted FTE, we're estimating a decrease of 325 students for head count. What does that mean in terms of total dollars? So our actual budget for last fiscal year was $400,134,151, and with these headcount estimates, we're anticipating a general fund budget of just over $415 million. That's an increase of $15.2 million to our general fund. And that includes the base state aid amount going from $4,846 to $5,088. Because our general fund is a percentage of our supplemental general fund is a percentage of our general fund. We take 33% of our general fund. And so we're estimating our supplemental general, or LOB, at $137.7 million, which is an increase of $8.2 million for this fiscal year. I want to give you guys some other key budget estimates this evening as well. So we're going to give you close to that $1 billion figure at the August 10th meeting, but just wanted to touch on some super key budgets this round too. So our federal funds, last year we had budgeted $161 million in our federal funds. We have spent down a tremendous amount of our ESSER 2 and 3 funds, and so we're only anticipating our federal fund budget to be about $80 million this year. Again, all of those funds are still 100% planned, and we anticipate those being pretty much fully spent by the end of this fiscal year. I have an asterisk next to that federal fund budget because that is a fund that is directly impacted by that percentage that we are waiting on KSDE to get us, and so that number could have some reallocations in it by the time we get to you next. The at-risk fund, we did have to republish that fund last year because with the change in how we're able to directly certify students who receive Medicaid services, that budget republished to $134 million, and we are anticipating about the same this year, so $134.4 million. We did increase the budget authority and did spend close to that amount this year. So we also moved some expenditures out of that fund after our at-risk audit, and so that's kind of why you see that staying flat. The special education fund, we budgeted $134 million last fiscal year, and we're anticipating with our raises this year for that to be $139 million. And that's another one that is going to be directly impacted by that percentage that we're waiting on. And that's probably the biggest fund that experiences that indirect charge. So that budget could again change by the August 10th meeting. Capital outlay, we have, last year we budgeted $101 million. We have that budget at $113 million this fiscal year. It's the largest budget capital outlay has ever seen. So grateful and thankful for ESSER funds to have allowed us the flexibility to be able to support Luke's team, especially as we've had some critical projects come up with school safety and HVAC and just maintaining some of our older buildings. Our budget will not be that high in fiscal year 25. So this is probably the last year that we have of a tremendous amount of flexibility to budget for some extra needs being met in that fund. I wouldn't anticipate that budget being that high next year. And again, at $113 million, that number doesn't get to that $156 million number per year that they quoted to you this evening. And this is the highest budget we've ever had. So our normal budgets sit between, I would say, $40 to $50 million in that fund. And so really at that point, we're just throwing a pail of water on a dumpster fire, maybe not making as much progress as we need to. So this will be the last year for those large capital outlay budgets. And then bond and interest, last year the budget was $22.9 million, and it'll be $46 million as we go into kind of the last 5 years of payoff of those bonds. Speaking of bond, I wanted to get you guys an updated bond and interest payment schedule, just to give you an idea of what the next 6 years of debt service looks like for our district. So we still have about $257 million of debt to pay off over the next 6 years. Sounds like a large number. The board has been so diligent about making sure that we have those cash reserves to be able to meet those debt requirements. So I know it sounds large, but we're doing what we need to do to make sure we can make those payments. So with all of those numbers I just quoted to you, I do want to chat about the LOB specifically. The LOB is a fund that we levy for local taxes to support that fund. And every year we have some fixed cost increases that for the most part hit that fund independently. And so some of this is a recap, but we did add some figures as we kind of finalized some of our budget pieces. And so utilities, transportation and fuel, property and casualty, other miscellaneous contract increases, those are things we anticipate every year. We budget for them. And we just know the costs are going to increase, and they're coming out of our LOB fund. So now that we have some additional funding out of our at-risk fund, the LOB actually has a mandatory transfer to support at-risk students as well. And so more of that fund is slated to support our at-risk fund now that we have those higher weightings and estimates back up. And so our transfer is almost $4 million more this upcoming year than what it was last year out of that LOB. And then I gave you that SPED number. Last year our budget was $134 million. We have a significant raise package this fiscal year, and so it's, of course, makes sense that our budget is now $139 million in special education. The state only put in an extra $7.5 million. We're good for about 10% of that on average, so $750 to $1 million is what we might see of that. That doesn't cover our costs and SPED to get us our wage package. So our local option budget really does support special education a lot when we have some of those cost increases. And so right now, where we are with our budget, and again, we're still missing some pieces, but some of those things that we don't have control over that we are going to be sending out of our LOB, we're at about $9.9 million. And we're only increasing our LOB by 8.2 because that's capped at 33% of our general fund. So we're able to do this because we make smart decisions. We constantly are evaluating our budget to make sure it's operating as effectively and efficiently as possible. But we do have growing costs, and our LOB has to support a lot of those as well. So that brings us to our estimated mill levies, which is a big chunk of what the board does for the budget, is establishing those mill levies for us. And so kind of want to go through all the iterations of where we were a couple of years ago, where we are going to recommend we land for this fiscal year, and then what we put on that revenue neutral rate form that's going to go out to our taxpayers with those calculated tax revenues. So for this fiscal year 24, we are going to be recommending a mill levy, and this may change just a smidge based on that percentage that we're still waiting on. Our total mill at 51.956. That is an increase to the mill of 0.472, and you can see that for the most part every fund is flat except for that category of other funds, which includes our LOB and our special liability fund. And so looking back at fiscal year 22, I take us back because that was kind of the last year that we had, that was our pre-COVID enrollment year, right? We still had 46,300 FTE in terms of our base enrollment that we were utilizing for our general fund budget. Fiscal year 23, we took that big hit where we lost 2,300 kids in that base enrollment amount. And so when we do that, our LOB goes down, right? Because if it's 33% of our general fund, it's less. And so we were able to reduce our mill significantly because our general fund reduced as well. So LOB also is kind of a swing set, or a pendulum really. You levy taxes, you get the cash. When you have more cash, you levy less taxes. And so it's always going to swing back and forth. It's just so dependent on what you're doing in your general fund, how much cash you have on hand, and what you need from your taxpayers. So we're always going to have a little bit of a pendulum in LOB. And you can see that fiscal year 22, it was up above 16. In fiscal year 23, we dropped it to 15.8. And then we're recommending this for fiscal year 24 to be back up into 16 at 16.274. So we'll continue to see that pendulum next year, where it will go back down. We'll have levied cash, and the anticipation would be that we would lower it again next year. So not a lot we can do about, we make estimated mill levies, and then when they get actual collections, it's just a part of the kind of estimation process, and it's tricky. So so then the last column is our revenue neutral rate, which is important for you all to know because I imagine you may be getting some questions from your constituents. So we did, just to give us some flexibility as we're finalizing forms, and we still don't have all the pieces of the budget that we need to be 100% confident in what's needed. We put 16.5 for other funds on that revenue neutral rate. So that's what's going to go out to our taxpayers with the calculation, but that's not what we anticipate to be filing with the county for our mill levy. So any questions on this particular topic before I move on? Awesome. Yeah.
Hold on just a second. So clarify that last statement that you just made, please.
So the revenue neutral rate form that we filed, the general fund, we have to put, it's 20. It's a flat 20. We have no ability to adjust that. That's 20 mills that we have to levy locally that gets sent to the state for reallocation. Same for capital. We know our capital needs. They're very great. Always going to recommend that 8 mills on the capital outlay. Again, on bond and interest, you all saw our debt schedule, $257 million over the next 6 years is what's going out of our doors. So we opted to leave that levy flat at 7.682. And so that's also on the revenue neutral rate form as well. So we left ourselves a little bit of flexibility in that other funds category. So you'll see that 16.5, which is what we filed on that revenue neutral rate form with the county. That's what they're going to utilize to generate those estimated tax statements that create a lot of confusion with our taxpayers. But that is not what we anticipate to publish with our budget and what we will finally intend to levy from them. So did that answer your question? Awesome.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that real quick. Thank you, Addie.
So we kind of went through the assessed valuation impact, so I'm just going to breeze through this, but kind of went through what our assessed valuations are, what those percentages are, because we are recommending to increase our mill a little bit, and I'll show you the impacts here on the next slide. But our taxpayers will mostly see the impacts on their property tax bill because of their assessed valuation increase. So that's what we're demonstrating here is when we leave all of our other mill levies flat, we're still generating some additional tax revenue, and that's just for the sheer purpose that everyone's assessed valuations are increasing in this area. So, so overall, we're looking at a 9.3% difference in additional tax revenues, and the majority of that, 8.7%, we would attribute to, on average, assessed valuation of homes. So this is the point. I think this is the question I get asked the most. What's the impact to our taxpayers? So leaving it as simply as possible, because of course nothing related to mill levies can be easy, but keeping it on a $100,000 home. The decision by the board to, and this will come later in our budget adoption process, but at the recommended mill levy that we've given you this evening, our impact on a $100,000 home is about $5. The majority of the property taxes that they'll see come from us establishing that mill levy is $55, but again, that's mostly assessed valuation changes. And you all see the rising costs that we have that need to be supported out of LOB, and we left all of our other mill levies flat. So really minimal impact on our taxpayers for this mill levy change that we're recommending. Yeah.
Who gets the $55 increase and who, so it's the $100,000 home
Yes.
will have only a $5 increase.
That is only the mill if assessed valuations had stayed the same.
Right, it's assessed value.
Right.
And what's the, I don't understand the last column.
So that's with a new estimated assessed valuation, and everybody's home value is going to be different. So it's hard to quote we used an average 8.3% for the purposes of this exhibit, but every taxpayer is going to see a different valuation change depending on where they live in the area. So if their home increases 8.3%, they will see $55 additional than what they saw last year on their tax statement. But again, $5 of that is because of our decisions on our mill levy. The rest of it is because of their assessed valuation change. So very minimal impact to our taxpayers based on our recommendations for the mill levy.
Thank you.
And that's annual.
That's annually, yes. Okay, I think I got us to the end. So just to summarize all the topics that we've gone through today, our building needs assessment requirements under KSA 72-1163, which was that House Bill 2567, that super bill that follows us around everywhere. We're mostly complete to date. So we got a lot of our official required topics done. Thank you so much for all your time and reviewing this big book with me. We'll get the rest of that done September 11th when we move to adopt the budget. Our revenue neutral rate form is filed with the county. That went on July 20th. And the estimated mill levy rate that is on that form is higher than what we anticipate it to be. So those estimates that are going to be mailed out to taxpayers on August 10th, that is more than what we anticipate to adopt and approve. So, and then finally got you guys some budget estimates with our head counts and some proposed budget numbers. Our general fund, we're anticipating $415 million with our LOB established at 33%, which is $137.7 million. And we are recommending an estimated mill levy at 51.956, which is an increase of 0.472 for fiscal year 24. So with that, I will open up for any questions you all may have.
Ernestine? Not tonight.
But it's in August, though, we'll be voting on it.
I believe in August.
So August 10th, we will be going over our notice of hearing, but no official action is taken at that time. We'll establish our budget hearing dates, and we'll go to publish our budget in the paper. Then on, I think it's August 24th, is the date that we have slated for our budget hearing. And we actually separated our hearing and adoption. We used to do those at the same time, but now that kind of building needs assessments are rolled into this process, we felt it was good to leave ourselves some more room in September to do a budget hearing and then do a budget adoption at a later date. So, and we've gotten so much work done this evening, so I'm hoping all 3 of those next meetings will be short, sweet, and concise.
Stan?
Thank you, Addie. I just wanted to kind of summarize the estimates that we've been given the last 2 months. Nothing has changed on those estimates except for the percentage that we're still waiting for the Kansas Department of Education, which is what kind of percentage again?
Sure.
What are you estimating
So,
it could be?
The estimates that we give for revenues sometimes are a little different than what we do on state budget forms, right? Because we like to give ourselves a little bit more flexibility on that maximum budget authority. So our weightings, we do a little bit of an increase. That's not quite, it's close, but not quite the same as those early revenue estimates that we give for budget purposes. This is more of what we actually anticipate to get. For our maximum budget authority amounts, we just go a little bit higher to make sure we've got some wiggle room in the budget. And the rate that we're still waiting on, it's the indirect rate. It's a rate that we're able to charge some specialized funds for the costs that are associated with supporting the programs that are established by those funds. So for example, special education. We can't charge directly to special education. Every special education teacher has to get a paycheck, right? Having a payroll department costs money. So that indirect rate supports the rest of those indirect costs for having to operate a special education program. So we have that on various grants and a lot of those restricted funds that we charge those programs for the indirect costs that are generated from operating those.
So our estimates for our next meeting on August 10th, if there are any big changes on these estimates that we've been presented to from the last 2 meetings, you would bring those to our attention at that time.
Absolutely. So at the next meeting, that's when we want to have super final numbers. Once we publish, we can't change those final budgeted figures. So, or we'd have to move out some dates and republish and do some extra work around that. So this information is what we're really building the budget on. We do have one thing to finalize, and then the numbers we come to you with on August 10th will really be our drop dead. That's where we're stopping there.
And then, and my last question, you mentioned we're separating out the 2 hearings this year, adoption and, well, the budget hearing and then the budget adoption.
We are.
Okay, and that is August 28th for the hearing and September 11th to actually adopt.
Thank you. I think I said the 24th. So
Yeah,
August 28th
that's why
and
I was
September
clarifying.
11th, yes.
So we're gonna, hopefully, if we stay on track, the 28th will be our budget hearing where the public can give us their input.
Yep, that's right.
And then on the 11th, they will also have another opportunity to give their input.
That will just, the September 11th date will be the opportunity for you all to adopt and approve the budget. There
So-
won't be,
Actually, so kind of the drop dead date is August 28th.
that's right, for
Okay.
the public,
And the
yes.
formal adoption is September 11th.
That's right.
Okay.
Okay, I know we've been over this a number of times, but there's going to be a lot of questions when these statements are mailed out to people. And so please summarize and explain again
Sure.
Why the mill rate will be higher than what we are actually
Sure.
going to go in with our budget.
Just like we build in some wiggle room on our maximum budget authority, because the timeline for this process is not perfect, because we're still waiting on various large pieces of our budget to finalize, because we need input and percentages from KSDE, we have to have a little bit of wiggle room in that revenue neutral rate that we file with the county to give us some contingencies on just in case something would significantly change in another direction. like I said, the timelines for this it's a little clunky because when we get some of those really critical pieces that go to, sometimes we don't get grant notifications in until the first week of August. This indirect rate holds us up a lot. So sometimes it's salary increases where we're kind of waiting on the last minute to make sure we can get things as accurate as possible. And so we have to file that revenue neutral rate form so early, July 20th, right? We got our state budget forms on July 3rd. That effectively gives my staff 2 working weeks to put a $1 billion budget for 3 years into a software. It's a tremendous effort and workload, and so we do have to estimate, knowing that there are some pieces of the puzzle that we still have to put into place, and so that estimate gives us just a little bit of wiggle room should we need it. But that's why we come in and give you all, before those statements go out, a more accurate look at where we actually think those estimates are going to fall. Between July 20th and today, we've made tremendous headway on getting all of our budget information into that budget software, and so it's difficult to fit our process into the timelines that are required by the statute. So the estimate gives us just a little bit of leeway should things change.
Okay. And then what are we waiting on for the Kansas Department of Education for them to get those numbers out to us?
When?
Well, what are...
It's that indirect rate.
Okay. And when do we expect those numbers from them?
Hopefully soon. So otherwise we'll be rolling with a highly educated estimate, so.
Okay. Any further questions? Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for all of your hard work, and thank you to the building administrators for doing all of the building needs assessments. It is a valuable source of information. I know everybody that I've spoken to, all the board members, we do read all of those. We do go through that information, and also throughout the year. So thank you to everybody involved with that, and appreciate the effort. So thank you.
Thank you.
Patrick, next item.
Next item, under miscellaneous, the superintendent's report.
I'm looking to Jennifer here to make sure I'm the right distance away. All right, so I don't blow everybody out of the water here. So last day of the first month on the job, so things are going really well. Super excited to spend the last few weeks with new teachers. Got to meet the bus drivers, new principals. New teachers are tomorrow. And all teachers come back on Thursday. So it'll feel like real school here soon, which is super exciting. A couple other things, just updates on things that have been going on or things that are coming up. First off, this is our last evening board meeting before school starts. So 2 weeks from tonight, we'll be going to bed early and being ready to get up early the next day. So hope all of our families start getting into those routines now. And just remind everyone to be safe as kids get back to school with transportation, bus routes, bike riders, etc. I also have a couple community events coming up I'd like to share about. So Neighborhood Night Out or National Night Out activities, August 8th. At the Urban League here in town, and then August 11th in Bel Air. So we'll be making appearances at those. And if you haven't seen, there's a couple things that we're trying to do just to communicate. One being a blog that we're posting every Friday that I'm writing, and 3 questions with Kelly that at least my father-in-law has said he finds entertaining. So not sure if anyone else watches it, but he's liked it, yeah. So he's gotten to know me better. I do want to lift up one thing tonight, that Goal 4 of the strategic plan is about being safe and trusted schools. And we heard tonight Addie share with us some of the things we're trying to do systemically to really support our teachers and creating safe environments, our students with student behavior. So she spoke about some of our ESSER staff positions that we've now put into a more permanent general fund budget or at-risk funds. Things like security guards, counselors, child study team staff. Those are one of the first groups that help students who are dysregulated and need extra support. We've done a significant investment in restorative practices across the district, training all staff, from custodians to food service to principals and teachers, and building capacity in that by training, getting people trained in that so we can facilitate that ourselves post-ESSER. So we look to for restorative practices to really help build community in our buildings. We're working to align mentoring, as I've talked with you guys about before, both within the district with our Future Ready advocates and then with our community partners. We're in the process at the secondary level of kind of reviewing protocols for expulsion and suspension of students, looking at creative placements, those sorts of things is what we might do to support all kids. And then really trying to connect kids with their future. So thinking about being future ready, individualized plans of study, the Future Ready Center, CTE programs, internships, all that kind of stuff to really get kids excited about their future. So those are all things we're doing this year currently for strategic goal plan number 4. And I kind of share all of that as a precursor to sharing about, what's been shared a couple times in the media over the past few months about the Department of Justice investigation that's going on, that we have been investigated as of spring of 2022, and fully cooperated with all of that, doing everything we can to cooperate with them. They're investigating student seclusions and how we equitably administer discipline, and you guys are aware of those things. So I told the DLT today, I truly believe that this process will help our district. I think coming out of it, we will have better outcomes, better systems for our kids and supporting our teachers. We value each and every student and each and every employee, and we want them all to be safe. So we anticipate the investigation with the Department of Justice will identify the need for remedial actions in these areas, and we intend to work with the DOJ to arrive at solutions. But I also know that you all believe as a board that the federal government doesn't have all the answers when it comes to our local needs. So we'll work with them, but we'll also maintain what we need to do to keep everyone safe within our district. So safety is critical, and we have to work together as a community to address these issues within our schools and outside of our schools. And one step we took this summer in doing so was a community summit that we hosted with the support of restorative practices trainers to really listen to the community and what they feel we need to do within our schools and how we can work together to support kids outside of our schools too. So our ultimate goal is future-ready students, and we want to do everything we can to ensure that they're ready for their future and they have all the tools they need to be successful. So that's my superintendent report.
Thank you, Superintendent Bielefeld. Patrick, next item.
Board of Education report and requests.
Kathy?
Okay, thank you for that, Superintendent Bielefeld. As I said in our agenda review, again, I appreciate all the efforts that you have put forward in the last month, and I continue to get excited and share with the community that our district is off to a good start. I met with you, of course. I love our meetings once a month, and I attended my husband's 47th, okay, he's probably not going to like this, his 47th Southeast High School reunion. So I am an honorary Buffalo, and there's a story to that, but I won't entertain that. The needs assessment meeting I found very useful, and I really appreciate the presentation that Dee Dee made on the finances and how the assessments that we were talking about just kind of like went together, and it was I understood it very well. I did attend a hearing with Evergy about how the rates are going to go up, and that's going to probably, you're going to have to amend your budgetary numbers if that does go up, because they're going to raise it about 10%, they say, and I know that you know that. Speaking of security and safety, this is a big thing for me, and we all got an email. Councilman Brian Fry also reached out to me because I'm in District 5 about the northeast part of Northwest High School, figure that out, of a police substation, and I am all too excited about that, and I hope that the district will move forward with that. And I hope that the board will unanimously agree with something like that. I think that it is a very, very good addition to my district, and I think that it's a good way because it's right by Northwest High School. And if that can divert any kind of behavioral issues, I would vote for a substation around all of our high schools. I wish that was a realistic thing to do. So I'm very excited about that. And Wilbur, we're coming up at you, okay? So I'm excited that Wilbur's gonna next one, right, Luke? Next one, so the next batch. So thank you, Superintendent Bielefeld, for everything that you do. That's it.
Julie?
I have no report or request tonight.
Thank you. I'm going to run down a quick list of some of the things that has been happening since our last board meeting. And last month I hosted a Future Ready open house. So the building, the old Dillon's building next to North High School is now our Future Ready Manufacturing Center. And we had about 50 people in attendance, and it just gave an opportunity for people to see what was inside there. We've got state-of-the-art equipment where students are able to learn hands-on experience, anything from a forklift simulator to 3D printers and laser engravers, and learning how to pound rivets, how to be industry ready for some of the industry leaders that we have right here in Wichita, so they can have jobs right out of Wichita, or right out of high school. I did a site visit with Superintendent Bielefeld, Luke Newman, Hazel, and Julie also joined. We visited East, Gammon, and Jefferson. We looked at new HVAC systems being installed and the secured entrances that are going in. Attended a building needs assessment where we went over the budget and individual buildings and their assessments from the principals. Attended a community conversation hosted by the Beacon and sat at a table to discuss K-12 education with community members. I toured the PBS's new facility with Lynn Wolf, and they focus on STEAM-based learning for kids that are 2 to 10 years old and their families. It's free and open during the weekdays from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. And the Education and Discovery Center has content to encourage creativity, improve social and emotional skills, build critical thinking, boost curiosity, and more. And it features hands-on and interactive discovery stations. And it is free admission. They offer studio tours, and field trips are also welcome. And you can find more on their website at kpts.org. And that is it for my report. Stan?
Thank you. Just two quick things. One thing I didn't want to make sure that did not go overlooked tonight, there was a critical budget decision made that I commend both the budgeting department for including or planning on including, and also the support this board has given that, and that is, and it was quickly ran over, but we are going to put the additional security guards that we instituted last year, and also the ESSER-funded counselors and social workers into our operating budget. That is no small feat for the small increase that we are going to have in this budget. The fact that we made that a priority, I want to make sure the public is aware of that. And the second thing I wanted to mention was at this time of year, all of us on the board gladly receive phone calls from families and parents about school openings and what is the dates for the enrollment, what are the school supply needs. And I want to commend our social media team for the good work they do. A lot of times when I'm on those phone calls with the parents, I will have another device or I'll put them on speaker, and all I do is open up our social media pages, and I usually can get them an answer right there on the phone. So good job for our social media team. Anyone that is looking for those type of answers, because I know we're all extremely busy getting ready to go back to school, but I definitely would recommend following USD 259's social media page. It really has a lot of good information, and I know a lot of work goes into that. So special shout out tonight to the budget team for understanding the importance of moving some of these very critical positions, whether it's in safety or whether it's in social work and counseling services, into our regular budget with a minimum impact to our overall budget. And also a special shout out to our social media team as we enter this very busy 2-week period of getting questions answered to our families. So thank you.
And
Ernestine?
that email is, that address is USD259.org, isn't it? And that there's a menu there so you can find it. I made a I've done some neighborhood presentations at neighborhood groups that want to hear about what's going on in our schools. And I just love it when they say, when are we going to have VOTEC back? And then it's like, wow, let me tell you, this is VOTEC spectacular, only better than anything you ever dreamed about. So I've been able to tell them all about it and about our students building the airplane and all of the things. So that was fun to be out in a neighborhood and when they were sort of giving a grumble about they don't teach such and such anymore, I was like, surprise, we do, and such else. So that's the main thing I've done. Thank you.
Thank you. Hazel?
As we all know, we have a lot of valuable community partners with USD 259. And recently I had the opportunity with Diane and Stan to tour the company headquarters of the Hutton Construction Company in Delano, who plays a very big part in our construction that we have going on right now. I also attended the school tour, construction tour led by Luke Newman. As Diane said, we visited East and we were able to see the front entrance that they're redoing. In fact, they said they would be finished like in a couple of weeks, and it was kind of hard to believe that would be happening, but we did. We were there in a grand storm, in the middle of a big storm. We went to Gammon and we saw the HVAC upgrades, Jefferson HVAC and secured entrances. And then we were able to drop into some summer school sites. We accidentally ended up at Isley and met the summer principal there. And then we toured summer school and program at Irving. It was so nice to see the excitement with the teachers who were working in summer school and the students that were there and all the things that were happening. It was very impressive. I attended the second annual Native American powwow honoring the graduates, the 2023 graduates. It was sponsored by the Indigenous Peoples Initiative, the Wichita Intertribal Warrior Society, the Wichita All Nations Powwow Council, and the Southwind Native American Church. And it was a powwow that was attended by about 200 people. It was a really good evening in honoring our Native American graduates. I also had the opportunity to drop in on the enrollment opportunities that they had for the Spanish-speaking families, where they had various stations where they were helping with passports, they were helping with enrollment. This whole room was set up with computers, with Spanish-speaking friendly people that helped them through the process of their enrollment, their lunch program enrollments, and then there were also various available services in the community, business partners like United Way, Guadalupe Health Clinic, but just a lot of resources that really help these folks and that are Spanish speaking, and they even had a live radio, Spanish radio, inviting people to hear. I understand it was the second event. The first one, they recruited 700, or they serviced 700 students, and I don't know what the second that one I went to.
It was about 1,600 total that we enrolled.
1,600 total that we enrolled in those two opportunities. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Patrick, next item.
Next item, new business.
I see no new business. Next item.
Next item, executive session.
Stan?
Vice President Albert, I move the board recess into executive session to discuss a settlement offer with the board's legal counsel pursuant to the exception for matters which would be deemed privileged in the attorney-client relationship under the Kansas Open Meetings Act, and the open meeting will resume here at 8:13.
Do I have a second? I second. Moved by Stan, seconded by Kathy. All in favor, raise your hand.
I apologize. Is 10 minutes from now, I'm trying to see that clock from this far. Can I dim?
It would be approximately 8:14 now.
8:14, okay, 8:14. Okay, I'm gonna amend my motion to 8:14. 8:14.
All in favor, raise your hand. Motion passes 6-0. We are in executive session. Okay, we are back from executive session. No action was taken. Patrick, next item.
Next item, adjournment.
Do I have a motion to adjourn? Motion moved by Kathy, seconded by Ernestine. All in favor, raise your hand. Motion passes 6-0. Thank you. Have a good night.